Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. It's finally time to experiment with space elevators. So let's get started. Alright, so it's finally the time. We need to experiment with some space elevators, styles, plans, or builds for our time-lapse series. As you've seen in the time-lapse series so far, we used a hinge with rotor wheel system to hug pillars to climb up. Now that sounds pretty fine and dandy and sounds like it's gonna work, but I had to go in and experiment with other designs just in case. So let's get started with the first design, and it would be this one right here. So this looks like a little bit of a rover on this pillar here, which is 3 wide on all sides basically. And this is the most simplistic way of doing some kind of elevator system that's not attached to the pillar, and that is a rotor system with some wheels attached, and it's gonna hug the walls and climb up. The reason for the wheels out here is just when it drops, it bounces a bit instead of just slamming on the ground and breaking. So as simple as this one sounds with the buttons here, we're just gonna increase the rotor's velocity positive to go up and decrease it to go down. So that's what these things are right here. Increase velocity and decrease velocity for all the rotors. So again, this is the most simplistic way of making some kind of elevator system, which kind of works generally, but not exactly the way you may like it, to be honest. So I've done an experiment like this before, so check out that video if you want to build something similar. And as you see here, as I'm increasing the velocity of the rotor, it goes up slowly, but the max is 30 RPMs and the max speed, meters per second, it's almost 4, which is really slow, especially if you want to do a space elevator to reach that high. It's going to be very painful and slow in that case. But it does work in terms of going down, going up, by increasing the velocity, as you see here. The problem that we run into is when we hit 0, sometimes it's going to end up kind of falling down. And another bad piece is that it's not quite straight, as you see here. It's a bit slanted because it's hugging a very kind of like small portion of the pillar. So a couple of ways to fix that is, one, with some landing gears. As you see in my time-lapse build, I used some landing gears to kind of fix it against the pillar. But for some reason, it kind of works, but it kind of doesn't. Meaning, it's the same kind of aspect, increase velocity and decrease velocity in 1 and 2 on the 2 bar. But if I do the max 30 RPMs, that's when it actually starts climbing. But when I reduce it to 0, that's when you're going to see it fall. So what happened there is basically that the landing gears, which is holding the support, is preventing the rotor wheels to climb on the pillar. So it's not really hugging against it really well. So that is kind of like out of the picture because it just doesn't work that well. There's no way to really stop it. And you see here, caused quite some damage. So the original wave that I did have these kind of things developed is having a more vertical layer, so it hugs from the top and the bottom on all sides, as you see here. So that's the better way to do it, other than landing gears, when you're going with this type of version where we can increase the velocity, as you see here, and then when we stop it, it stops. It slowly drops a little bit, but it's not too bad. But if we increase the velocity all the 30 RPMs, once again, max speed is about almost 4 meters per second. By putting it to 0 velocity, we do drop just a bit, which is not ideal as well. For whatever reasons, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's a little bit odd. Not going to work for my build in the time lapse because I want it to be a little quicker. But of course, we could slap on pretty much a thruster or something like that, and that should pick up the speed. So I have one kind of preset over here so that we can continue to use if we needed to. So you place this one down right over here and pretty much get rid of this. sometimes from what I've seen is that we get stuck when we copy and paste it because of the wheels for whatever reasons. Not exactly sure why. So all we gotta do is just get rid of the wheel in that sense. And we could attach some thrusters right over here. So we could potentially go a lot faster than the 4 meters per second in this case. However, the only other problem I do foresee here is that the faster you go, kind of the faster you're gonna destroy the pillar as well. So if I go fast, as you see here, everything underneath it kind of gets destroyed. Kind of. So that's the problem with that current build here. So that might not work out exactly how I imagined it when I built it for the time lapse. So that's the original way I thought about doing the elevator, which clearly doesn't really work. So I decided to work on it this way. So that's the time-lapse version that we're building for the space elevator. Is to use a hinge on a block with some rotor wheels to hug up against the pillar and go up. And this one seems to be working out pretty well. So if I got on here, same thing. Increase velocity, decrease velocity, it should go up. So looks like I'm having a little problem here, and it's probably because I copied and pasted on here. Or maybe because I need to increase the velocity just a bit, or gotta increase the angle just a bit. So I'm trying to get it attached to the wall. Here we go. Yep, we just pushed it against the wall a little bit better. So here's your 30 RPM. Oh, that's breaking it. That's interesting. That's not good. So that didn't happen earlier. So now it's kind of like a hit or miss kind of situation, which is not something I like. I always wanted to work out pretty fine and not have it kind of be a hit or miss kind of situation. So it worked previously, but now since I reloaded, for some reason it doesn't seem to be working right. So that is a bit scary for the time-lapse build in that sense. So maybe what I have is not going to work. I don't know. I do have it a bit more of a larger scale, meaning I have 3 pillars, so it might lighten the load a little bit. But I guess ultimately we're going to have to try in the time-lapse build to really see if it's going to work. This is more of a smaller scale build, so that's probably why we have a little bit of these issues. But I'm not sure why it kind of like toasted that down a bit. But here we go. We're going up slowly. Yeah, it's extremely slow. I'm not sure if the wheels are causing any issues. It's possible. So let's just get rid of them. Here we try to climb up, and it looks like it's not doing too well. Not hugging it nicely. Okay, that's fine. The idea really is to implement thrusters on it anyways. So let's put on a couple thrusters to kind of smooth it out, and that seems to work out okay. That's not too bad. So we do definitely need a thruster to smooth it out, and it doesn't hug the walls good enough. If I increase the hinge angle to hug the wall a little bit more, it actually squeezes the pillar and breaks it. So that's something we definitely don't want to happen. What's interesting now is that with the thruster, it's holding it up. Even if I thrust upwards, I can't go anywhere because we're stuck with the rotor wheels. So that's actually pretty interesting. So if we increased the RPMs and boost it up, we get at least 5 meters per second instead this time. So that's kind of interesting. And we do kind of downwards. Okay, so it seems like the idea I have for my current space elevator, the quickest it's gonna go is 5 meters per second. That's gonna take a very long time to get from the very bottom of Earth all the way to space. So might need to rethink that. But this is my secondary version, or the version now I'm thinking that I'm using. It might not work, so that's not good. But the good thing about this is that we can, if we need to pick up the speed, take the hinges and reduce the velocity or reduce the angle just a bit. So I want to say roughly, let's just say 25 as the angle. And then we want to change the velocity, just go like that. And that releases it off the walls a bit, and we can just easily boost upwards with the thrusters. But once again, it doesn't bode well because it's going to break the pillar a bit. So, you know what? Maybe the idea wasn't to do it that way. But the idea would be actually take the hinge ones, squeeze the wall, and take off the rotor's velocity or turn it off, and then go upwards. So that way it creates a rotation against the wall and hopefully not break anything. But it seems like that's not the case. Okay, so we are gonna get stuck with a fairly slow system with this current build that we have. So that is a bit alarming on a small scale. Definitely alarming. So not sure how well that is going to work. So the next up idea I was thinking involves regular wheels with the suspension. Now this kind of works out pretty well. The only problem is when you merge it into the grid and build the suspension and everything like that, this happens. It merges into the wall a little bit, so you have to shake it off. You have to push it with a piston or something once you unmerge so that it gets unstuck. So for example, if I did this, oh, actually it worked out pretty well. Last time it got stuck and I couldn't even move anything, but looks like this one worked out okay. And the wheels, what we can do is lower the strength, maybe 10% or something like that. These are my current settings basically, right? No steering. I have 10% power, 10 strength, negative 45 for height offset, 100% friction, speed limit. We can lower it, increase it, doesn't even matter at this point. Propulsion override and everything left alone. One of the biggest things is that when you put these wheels kind of like this way, the way I have it, some of the wheels spin the opposite way that you want it to go. So there are two wheels that will go upwards and downwards correctly with the controls. And then there's going to be two that's inverted for whatever reason. And I think it's the angle of how I place them. But it always seems to be this one and this one or something similar to that is doing that. So what we did is basically do invert propulsion so that both sides or all wheels will be going upwards and downwards correctly, not fighting each other. Because if you don't set invert propulsions for two of them, it's going to fight you in that sense. So these two are not inverted, the other two are inverted. And I have the seat kind of staring upwards like that so we can drive it forward and backwards fairly easily. So here we can, right, so yeah, I think it did get stuck actually. So you see here, I can't move up and down or do anything at the moment. I'm not sure exactly why. Or do I have my wheels off? No, it's on. Propulsion is on. So, that's weird. It dropped. Yeah, it dropped, but it's not doing anything. It's not a station, it's a ship. So, that is very interesting. So I guess we can test it out by placing a piston, and let's see if it pushes it down. We're stuck somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. And this is what's happening when we built it like this. Okay, so it is going up, okay. And it drops down. Okay, so it is released off of something. So I think, and it's probably the problem, is changing the power too low. So, yep, it definitely is. So here is the 20% power, and it's slowly going up, which is a good thing, but we can also stop it by holding a space bar, by handbrake, or hit park. Slows it down as much as possible, but not necessarily as great as it should be. But of course, we can use the landing gears there that we have here to really, really stop it by locking in. So it looks like power-wise, we should increase it just a tiny bit. But I think once we get to a max speed, it's gonna start braking. So we gotta find a good speed point for this elevator. And I think I don't know yet if I want to switch it off to these wheels, or should I keep it with the current setup, or I can use a combination of the suspension wheels with rotors, hinges, or whatever the case is, and use a mod for subgrid wheels or script so it can control the wheels. But I kind of thinking I should convert it to the suspension wheels, because when we drop down, it hits the wheels and it doesn't hurt the platform, which is good. The other thing that we had, it's going to hurt the platform, so that's where it gets a little tricky. And this thing runs pretty smoothly. I have like 30% power, and right now you can see it's going 10 meters per second already. So that is not bad at all. And we can stop it with your parking brakes. Well, hopefully. Well, maybe not in this case, but it drives okay. So I think this would be the better way to go. That was about 10 meters per second. Nothing was braking. The max speed on the thing was 180. So I don't know if we hit the max speed, would it start braking anything? It's possible, but I know if we put more speed to it or power, it's gonna brake faster. But we're gonna reach the speed a lot faster as well. So here's like right there, started braking. I think that was about 15 meters per second where it started to brake. So I guess the elevator is gonna be quite slow. And I think we can use this version to climb up a little bit better without having to brake much. Well, the only reason why it broke is probably the landing gear that's connected. So I also decided to make this version, which for some reason I made some higher than the others. Not planned, but it is what it is. But you have the bottom wheels and then you have the top wheels, so it has a nice way of hugging the walls. And I think these wheels are kind of the same, well, a little more height offset, it's hugging it a lot more. Power is 30%. So these are pretty much the settings. I had to do the same thing, invert some of them. For propulsion, power is 30%, strength is 10. Height offset, I pretty much hugged the entire wall pretty tightly, so let's just leave it as that. Negative 1.50. 100% friction, and here's the top speed. Maybe we slow down the top speed a little bit so we don't break anything. But 30% power with this guy is not too bad. 10 meters per second, and we're not breaking anything, so that's good. And it stops fairly well. It's not too bad. So it's a possibility that we're gonna have to go with this version of the space elevator. I'm not sure what just happened there, but I think we just fell into a gap. Or it's starting to break. Okay, so it did start to break the walls just a tiny bit. Okay, so this is all kind of getting worrisome, where there's a chance that it's gonna break the walls a little bit. And I think it is because I did the height offset a little bit too much. I think 0.45 was a good hug, which shouldn't cause too much damage, which is not hugging it too hard. Yeah, I think we have to set it that way so it doesn't hug too hard against the pillars. But this seems to be working fine. You see how we just dropped it. So I think we might have to do this in the time lapse. We might have to change it up a bit. I mean, we could test out the larger version of it to see how it goes first. And if it crashes and burns, at least we know it's gonna crash and burn, and we will have to change it to the wheels instead, which seems to be the better option. And even with this, we could, if we really needed to, we can add thrusters on here as well, right? And have it hug as a guide, and I think we should be able to go pretty fast. Yeah, so that's not too bad. Going that fast, and it did break the pillars a bit, so maybe we reduce the hugging a little bit more so that it doesn't break our pillars. So that's going to be the experiment for today. So that was interesting find in terms of the rotor wheel version or the suspension wheel version. I tried a suspension wheel version a long time ago, but it always merged into the block somehow. So I never really worked with it until now. But I found a solution, and that's to either try to pop off of it by holding X and jump, or use a piston on the outside, like right here, and just shove it a little bit, and it should release it just a bit. So that's what I've been doing to kind of get that like released or not stuck, and it seems to work out pretty well. So that's your tip for today if you decide to build the space elevator with the suspension and you see that's clipping through the walls. That's what I usually do. I don't know why this is clipping through now, but what it normally did was push it against the wall to release one side and release the other side. Or what we got to do is get rid of the wheels, push it in some ways, and then add the wheels back on. So that's one way of doing it. So that should help out a little bit in that sense. I have some other strange ideas for elevators, but it's just going to be just as slow. So I think the fastest version would be the wheel suspension, and we just got to find the right offset, the right strength, so that it doesn't hug the wall too hard, so that so that it doesn't break the pillar, and not too soft so that it can't stop. So those are the problems we're going to run into. But yeah, I never made a space elevator yet. This is going to be my first time. So I had to go and experiment with it. And I'm pretty sure you guys have a better idea how to do this with this type of setup. So feel free to drop a comment down below. And of course, we'll take it into consideration. Other types of elevators we could use. One of the stranger ones that's in my mind is doing an elevator system with lots and lots of hinge connected together on a rotor wheel to slowly bring it up, which is, it's still going to be only 4 meters per second fast because it's based on the 30 RPMs on a rotor. What other ways we could do it? Of course, thrusters, but we got to find a way to connect it decently to the pillar so that it doesn't break the pillars at all. Or maybe we use heavy armor blocks instead of light armor blocks. So those are the things we're gonna have to consider. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, this experiment, so that I can kind of show you the pros and cons of making these types of space elevators or climbing systems to get into space without a ship. Alright, so with that said, please hit that thumbs up, like the video, drop a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and of course, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.